Chapter 5. Country Living. Dalton's first stop the next morning was at Jasper's crappiest looking used car lot, Big T Auto Sales. He wasn't quite sure what he'd expected to find, but what he did find made him a happy man. Right there out front on the lot, with V8 painted proudly on the front windshield, was a Buick Riviera. It was the same make and model as he'd handed over when picking up his Mercedes in New York, but this was a 65, a year younger than his old one. The colour wasn't as nice, a rusty red as opposed to the off-white of the one he'd left in New York, but the colour didn't matter. What mattered most was that it was reliable and easy to find parts for. What he also liked about this one, and which he knew Buick had only used on the 65 version, was the clamshell covers on the front lights. They were closed now, like little armour plates over the bulbs. That would come in handy. He lifted the hood, enjoying the weight of the metal they used in these old workhorses. The big cylinder of the V8 engine was there, just as advertised, and a quick scan and poke around showed Dalton no serious issues. Right on cue, the big salesman, who Dalton assumed was the Big T referred to in the name of the business, judging by the size of him, came trundling out of his office. "She's a runner," he declared proudly. Dalton almost asked whether he routinely put non-runners out front on the lot too, but he didn't have time for any chit-chat today. He had things to do. Instead, he closed the hood with a satisfying clunk and lit a cigarette, taking a look over the front of the car. He nodded at the clamshells. "These work?" he asked. "Sure do," Big T replied with a smile. He reached inside the driver's window to flick a switch. The little metal plates parted with a motor-driven buzz. That was enough for Dalton. "I'll take it," he said, and Big T's smile grew even wider. Dalton's next stop was the local scrapyard. The owner, puffing away on a fat stogie, pointed him in the direction of a few tyres of the right size. "Which one's your problem?" He mumbled around the cigar, touring around the Buick and looking at each wheel. "None," Dalton told him. "Yet." He bought 4 used tyres and shoved them all tightly into the large trunk of the car, before heading out of the yard with a salute to the owner. Next, Dalton needed to find a place to stay. He asked around town for somewhere out of the way and got the name of an old farmer who had a place for rent, plus some general directions to the place. He found it easy enough. The main entrance was just off the highway, but there was a private half-mile dirt road down to the main property. Dalton thought it was some pretty country. He pulled up to the old farmhouse, a wooden single-story design with a larger 2-story barn to its side and some horses out front. As he got out of the car, he spotted a farmer working in the barn, an older man with a big grey beard, sporting worn dungarees and a sun hat. "Morning," Dalton called to him as they walked towards each other. "You the one who's got a room to rent?" The farmer said, and gestured for Dalton to follow. "Come on." He took Dalton into the large barn, where he was surprised to find a nicely crafted set of stairs near the door. "Are you honest?" the farmer asked as they ascended the stairs. It was a blunt question, but Dalton liked that. "Yes, sir," he answered. "You expect me to believe that?" the older man asked, slowing down to meet his eye. Dalton chuckled. "No, sir." He liked this man already. The second floor of the barn was like a studio apartment, a kitchen diner in one corner, some couches and a table in the other, and a good-sized bed with an old trunk at the bottom in the centre. One wall was made up of a few almost floor-to-ceiling windows, giving a beautiful view of the river outside. Dalton could hear the birds chirping and knew that he could find some peace here. The beauty of nature's chorus was interrupted, however, by what sounded like a helicopter whirring outside. It seemed like it was getting closer. Dalton opened one of the big windows and looked out for the source of the noise. Sure enough, a white helicopter was buzzing overhead across the river. It hovered for a moment above a large mansion-sized ranch house that was sat there in manicured grounds, somewhat at odds with the wilder rural aesthetic around it, before it made a pass towards the farmhouse and the barn. Dalton could hear the horses whinnying in the paddock below. "God damn it!" complained the farmer, running down to tend to his panicked animals as the helicopter circled overhead. Dalton followed him down. When the helicopter finally left, seeming to land on the ranch house grounds from what Dalton could tell, the farmer relaxed a little. "I swear, he does that just to piss me off," he stated. "Who does?" asked Dalton, still trying to calm the horses. "Brad Wesley," said the farmer, sounding like he wanted to spit. "Like horses, do you?" he asked Dalton. "If they like me," Dalton answered. The farmer put on his best suspicious scowl. "You wouldn't steal 'em, would you?" Dalton wanted to smile, but realized he was being asked a serious question. "No, sir," he answered earnestly. "Calling me sir is like putting an elevator in an outhouse," the farmer told him. "Don't belong," he said, shaking his head. Dalton chuckled. "I'm Emmett," said the farmer, taking off his work glove to offer his hand. "I'm Dalton," said Dalton, and they shook. "So what do you think?" Emmett asked, putting his glove back on and getting back to work baling hay. Dalton looked up at the barn apartment. "Well, I'll take it." Emmett moved a large bale with his hooks, then turned to Dalton. "Must have been 20 people look at that room in the past year. No phone, no television, no conditioned air, no tolerance for the fragrance of nature." Dalton gave him a hand moving the next bale, knowing that Emmett thought he was listing all the problems with the place, but was actually just listing the things that Dalton liked about it. "Nobody wanted it," Emmett concluded. "How come you do?" Dalton seemed to consider that for a moment. "You're just too persuasive for me, I guess." The pair laughed and continued moving the bales. "It ain't the money, you understand," Emmett went on. "But if I don't charge you something, the Presbyterians around here are likely to pray for my ruination." He made his offer. "How does $100 a month strike you?" "Fine," Dalton agreed. "You can afford that much?" Dalton knew that he was dealing with a good man. "If it keeps you in the good graces of the church," he smiled. Emmett smiled back. "Ain't it peculiar how money seems to do that very thing?"